Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Before we get started, allow me to state that we respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who have lived on this land since time immemorial. TCU especially acknowledges and pays respect to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose historical homeland our university is located. Once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Frederick Gooding Jr., aka Dr. G, and I am chair of TCU's Race and Reconciliation Initiative. Our charge has three components: to study TCU's relationship with slavery, racism, and the Confederacy. You will find out everything that we learned within this past year on April 21st, 2021. Be there or be square. The fact of the matter is that we're going to have an event by the Clark Brothers statute whereby we will share what we have learned in the first year, share our recommendations that we've shared with the Board of Trustees, and also share with you results. Feel free to check our website for more details and more information. Even if you're not able to attend in person that day, we will have the ceremony posted for viewing later, because this is indeed a step towards reconciliation. So again, I just want to remind our listeners that we are indeed an academically based, historically focused initiative. And so while you are free to ask your questions and interact with our guest speaker, any questions outside of the scope of RRI, of course, will be directed to the appropriate parties. And so I am pleased to introduce the introducer who will introduce our guest, because we are fostering these town halls and webinars and sessions like these to foster a sense of community. While we are hard at work in the archives, uncovering and discovering the TCU history so we can tell the full truth, we also wish to stay in contact, stay in community, and stay in conversation through sessions like these. And quite appropriately, our last webinar of the semester is entitled Unity in the Community, as hosted by the human potential specialist, Bryant K. Smith. And so we're fortunate you can join us for a discussion this evening, as we hope it will help provide critical perspective and deepen understanding for what we hopefully will push us forward and toward action and healing, or in other words, reconciliation. It is at this point in time I'd like to call forth the individual who is eminently eminent, the mellifluous, the marvelous, the magnificent, and that would be our graduate research assistant, wonderkind, Mr. Marcellus Perkins.
Dr. G, thank you for the introduction as always. My name is Marcellus Perkins. I come as one, stand as 10,000. I can because they did. At this moment, I have the honor to introduce Mr. Bryant K. Smith. Bryant K. Smith is the baddest brother on the planet, period. Not just another speaker or facilitator, Bryant is an investor in human potential. He doesn't speak at his audience, he pours into them. Using a combination of theory, life experience, hope, and optimism, he provides his audience with an unrivaled leadership experience that helps them discover and tap into their unlimited potential. Bryant is the president and CEO of Smith Consulting and Networking, Smith Can, a comprehensive consulting, speaking, and coaching firm, a seasoned higher education administrator, prolific classroom lecturer, and championship basketball coach. Bryant founded Smith Can in 2000 as a vehicle to better help businesses, teams, and schools invest in the most valuable assets, their people. Bryant has presented in more than 1,000 audiences across the United States and in Spain as a guest of the Spanish Consulate. He served as Director of Multicultural Affairs and International Student Services at 2 universities in the United States, has taught courses in communication at Clemson University, diversity and leadership at Lander and Milken University, and served as an adjunct instructor of communications at Tri-County Technical College in Pendleton, South Carolina. Insightful, engaging, deep, and real are all words audience have used to describe his experience with him. He is the author of 9 published books and a recurring presenter and facilitator at several annual conferences on educational equity, leadership, diversity, and manhood. Considered by many to be a thought leader on the intersection of popular culture, equity, and inclusion, Bryant is a highly sought after speaker and facilitator, a proud product of the Chicago public school system and beneficiary of TRIO program support throughout college. He understands that hard work will always overcome hard times. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago and now residing in South Carolina, Bryant incorporates lessons as he learned growing up in one of the most racially segregated cities in the nation and moving to the New South into much of his professional work. When how it is said, just as important as what is said, you want Bryant K. Smith, the human potential specialist, to say it. At this time, I would like to bring to the stage the baddest brother on the planet, Mr. Bryant K. Smith.
All right. Thank you, Brother Marcellus, for that introduction. I am going to start right away with sharing my screen and move us into this space where we can have this conversation. And let me also put a little video to me. I want to say thank you all for inviting me here tonight. It's always a pleasure to be able to come in and see my good friend and brother, Dr. G. And in case you don't know, the G is not for gooding, it is for gangster, because Dr. G is a gangster about his academic studies, about this work, and about his people. So I want to thank him for inviting me, and all those of you who are on the Race and Reconciliation Committee that had anything to do with me being here tonight. I am here today to really just kind of have a conversation with you. So, and this is, trust me, I'm not just going to sit here and talk at you, but I want to begin by setting up the climate. So we're at a time where Black students at predominantly white universities are under attack. And we can go back really 3 or 4 years ago and start looking at things like this incident at the University of Arizona, where 2 students attacked a Black guy, their roommate, and tied noose in the closet, actually tied him up and put him in the closet, all kinds of things. But I'm going to share a couple others with you. I'm going to do some video like this incident.
And I want to show you what's happening on this campus right now. These protesters, they've been out here all day. There is outrage on this campus tonight as these protesters are sending a message.
We're out here to support Jazzy, to let her know that she doesn't stand by herself.
Protesters standing up for a student here named Jazzy Rowe, an African-American student whose roommate admitted to doing disgusting things to get her to move out. That roommate, Brianna Brochu, spelled it all out on social media. In an Instagram post, she wrote, "Finally did it. Yo girl got rid of her roommate after 1.5 months of spitting in her coconut oil, putting moldy clam dip in her lotions, rubbing used tampons on her backpack, putting her toothbrush places where the sun doesn't shine, and so much more. I can finally say goodbye, Jamaican Barbie."
That's disgusting.
And that's just disgusting. I agree with the sister that says that's disgusting. But wait, there's more.
His freshman year has been turned upside down by what happened just about 2 weeks ago. They say so far there's been no accountability. They are demanding action.
I was looking forward to making friends and having a good time on the cheer team.
These pictures show a smiling Kristen Evans the day she committed to Stephen F. Austin University after being recruited for their cheer squad.
But since this has happened, it's made it really, really, really hard.
The 17-year-old freshman now struggling after becoming the victim of what her attorney believes was a racist setup orchestrated by her 3 white roommates.
Falsely accused Kristen of having scissors and threatening to stab people. Well, that's an extremely serious crime.
After getting the false report, university police stormed Kristen's dorm room.
Their daughter was sleeping and awoken at 3 o'clock in the morning by local police with flashlights shining at her.
I can't sleep at night because of this. It has made me really paranoid.
This could have been a Breonna Taylor circumstance.
Attorney Randy Callanan says police reviewed dorm surveillance video and told Kristen's parents in a text message that it proves their daughter is innocent.
This is a horrible thing that no parent should get a phone call for.
But the family says 2 weeks later, they are still waiting for the university to take action.
So we go from students attacking a roommate to students using the state police department and force to attack a student. We're also at a time when HBCU enrollment is increasing because of the way that Black students are treated on predominantly white campuses. people are starting to ask more questions such as, should Black athletes go to Black schools? Which, hey, Baylor just won a national championship. And even just yesterday, the coach had to say no to an automobile because the person or the dealer who was giving the school the automobile for his use got on television and made a insensitive comment about making sure we get more players from the hood. So these things are being discussed, the climate that we're in. And at the same time, people are talking about, well, those Black Lives Matter protesters, and they're just so violent, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, in reality, 93% of the racial justice protests that have been going on over the last couple of years have been without violence. They've been peaceful. And this is based on a study that was done by the... Compare that to this.
All right, so I came pretty well prepared for this thing today. Kel-Tec P3AT, 380 ACP, Glock 19, 9mm, Ruger LC9, also 9mm, and there's a knife. Well, I actually have another AK in that bag over there. You lose track of your fucking guns, huh? I'd say it was worth it. We knew that we were going to meet a lot of resistance. The fact that nobody on our side died, I'd go ahead and call that points for us. The fact that none of our people killed anybody unjustly, I think, is a plus for us. And I think that we showed our rivals that we won't be cowed.
Now, in case you're not familiar with that particular date and the incident, that was what that one person took with him to what was supposed to be a peaceful protest in Charlottesville, Virginia, where one young lady was killed. And as he stated, not unjustly, and no one on his side. So on the one hand, we're talking about the violence from the Black Lives Matter movement, where our president talked about that violence and said there was just some good people on both sides. And I'm building this case to show you about the climate, because when you start saying we need some unity in the community, I got a few questions I need to ask as we deal with what does the community look like and what does the community want. The Department of Homeland Security has gone forth and done research and said that white supremacists are the top threat. We're not worried about Al-Qaeda, we're not worried about the Taliban, but the top threat to the United States, it happens to be white supremacists. We've also got this story, where at the same time, the former president was saying, we're not going to have any more anti-racism training, and you can't use critical race theory, and you can't have training that says white privilege. And a lot of institutions across the nation, predominantly white institutions, stopped their diversity work based on this issue, this executive order that was sent out. Now, some of them, you could argue, might have really wanted to stop it anyway, but they needed a good excuse and they got it in that executive order. And at the same time, the Justice Department put out a report that says, hidden in plain sight, we have got white supremacists in almost every law enforcement agency in the country. And they don't know what to do about it. They're just trying to figure it out, as well as our military. And so I'm building this case to say, okay, we can't talk about community without talking about the state of the communities, and that there is a serious problem that we have that we got to face. And if you are a Black student at a predominantly white campus, then you get to be really ready for some of this stuff that you're dealing with. So the Justice Department says we got a problem with white supremacists in police department. And this guy is a University of Las Vegas police department, UNLV. He's an officer, but this is his Halloween costume. He dressed up as Colin Kaepernick and of course put his little blackface stuff on, and he thought this was funny. And so am I supposed to trust that this same guy who thinks this is funny is going to protect me and my students and my children who look like me in his regular day job? Or should I be more worried that this is what's going to happen? And we've all seen this picture. We've all seen this image. The Chauvin trial is what's going on. It's not the George Floyd trial. It is the Derek Chauvin trial. And the defense rests their case today. So within the next week, I think Monday, they'll take the case to the jury, or they'll have closing arguments and those kind of things. So we'll find out if America is ready to have a community real soon. But I want to take us back to 2009 when Newsweek asked the question, is your baby racist? And when Newsweek asked this question, people was, oh my God, how can you say something like that, racist? Because remember, it's 2009, we've got a Black president. So no one was thinking that racism was real anymore. For the most part, institutions start saying, hey, that dream that Martin had, it is happening. We don't have to discuss this anymore. But I want to say in 2009, those kids that this article was talking about, how old are they now? Where are they now? What have they been exposed to for the last 6 years? How much have they seen? How much have they ingrained in their brain set? And where are they going to go to college? And what are our institutions going to do? And how are we going to form a community knowing that they are coming? Ladies and gentlemen, I say thank you again for inviting me. I'm going to stop the screen share for a moment and let you all know that I'm proud to be here tonight. If you have not been prepared or had the pleasure of sitting in one of my sessions before, you know that I am not here to just sit here and talk at you. We're going to have a little experience. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I love this webinar format. So I'm going to take you through what I call an exercise in critical thinking. And as we get ready to hit this exercise in critical thinking, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to do it a little differently this time. And if you've seen me present before, then you've seen this trick. If you haven't seen me present before, you might not have seen this particular trick, might not be familiar with what I'm about to show and share with you. But I want to go ahead and move us forward to tonight's conversation. That's right. I'm going to put myself in the slideshow right now. So if you haven't seen this trick before, here I am in the slideshow. Tonight, we're going to discuss unity in the community, the real busted challenge. Now, some of you might not be into pop culture, but my discipline happens to be communication. So I'm always incorporating pop culture, multimedia into what I talk about. So for those of you who are familiar with the busted challenge, we're going to do what I call the real busted challenge tonight. It is a Black undergraduate student skill intensive training. That's what BUSTED stands for. I want you to be engaged because I just showed you the climate that we're dealing in. So my job is to prepare this next group of leaders for what it is we have to deal with and talk about today. Now, if you've never sat in on one of these sessions, and I know you've been having webinars, etc., if you're on here for extra credit, this is going to help you. This is what we call a BQL sheet. If you want to know how to take notes, make yourself a BQL sheet really quick. It's simple. It's 4 columns. And basically where it says busted, that's the name of the session. And those things that are in the A column are things that we are going to talk about tonight. I'm definitely going to talk about those. In the B column, what is it that you know or believe about those things? That's where you would write what you know. In the C column, what kind of questions do you have? And you write your questions so that as I give my lecture tonight and presentation, if I don't address your particular question, then you already have a question and you're ready to drop it into the chat room, okay? And then last but not least, once you are done, once I am done, when you get ready to go back, if you have to do extra credit and you got to write that report, you have a column for what it is that you have learned about each one of those topics that I said we were going to talk about. So remember, these are the things I said I'm going to talk about: leadership, timelines, critical thinking, strategy, skills, and being Black. Now, of course, there are going to be some additional, so make sure you put some blanks down so that you can cover those. What it is that you believe about these things. What do you question and what have you learned? This is how we're going to roll for the rest of the evening, okay? Now, I'm ready. If you're ready, let's go ahead and do this right here. Oh, yeah, by the way, if you would like to, take pictures of the slides, because I know what normally happens when I finish, people go, oh, Mr. Smith, wow, that was great. That was fantastic. I really like what you did. Can you send me the slideshow? And my answer is going to be no. This is my intellectual property. This is how I make my living. For the last 16 years, my full-time job is traveling from school to school before the pandemic, doing workshops like this for people live and for corporations. Now, because of the pandemic, we're on this virtual space, and I am doing my best to bring it to you in the same type of energy and enthusiasm that I would do if I was there with you live. So here we go. That's the warm-up. For those of you who need structure, the haters in the room, I mean, you know, those of you who need structure, I'm sorry. We're going to critically think about what it is to be in a Black organization. I'm going to give you some simple definitions. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different theories. I'm going to give you a few examples. I'm going to put some stuff in context for you, and I hope we're going to have fun. So that's what we're going to do if you need structure. So at the end, when they tell you to fill out an evaluation, don't say you didn't like the bald-headed Black guy from the south side of Chicago's bald head. You look at what it is I said I was going to do. If I did it and I did a good job, then that's what you write in the evaluation. If I did it and I did a poor job, That's what you write in evaluation, because the only way for me to get better is if you give me honest feedback. So I'm not ashamed or afraid of the controversy or the criticism. This is the critical thinking process. And let me step out of the way so that you can copy the critical thinking process. There are 6 steps in the critical thinking process. Step number 1 says you have to accept that what you think was the truth may not be the truth. If you want to be a critical thinker, that's the first thing you have to do. It's like watching the movie The Matrix. Yes, the very first Matrix, where Morpheus, the bald-headed black guy, talks to Neo. For the state of this argument tonight, you all are Neo. And he tells him, you can take this pill or that pill and you can go down the hole and forget it, or you can go down this hole and you'll learn the truth. So to be a critical thinker, forget what you've been taught about being black, about the community, about what it takes to build a community, and let's start from there. Identify and clarify the problem. No, don't worry about that. I did it for you. I have already said what I believe the problem. I think black students are living at a time when they are viewed as dangerous and needed control and extermination, and need new leaders and new organizations in order to build and sustain community. So I already did that for you. We're in step 3, gather information. I brought some information in the Q&A and in the chat you can contribute. We're going to evaluate this evidence. Then we're going to consider all the alternatives and implications. And at the last, number 6, that's one right there. Yep, number 6, that's where you get to choose and implement whatever is best for you. Notice nowhere in this process does it say agree with the shiny bald-headed black man from the south side of Chicago, currently living in Clemson, South Carolina, because you don't have to agree with me. But in order to disagree with me, all I'm going to ask you to do is to be a critical thinker and think critically. So I'm going to assume that you all have committed to the concept of critically thinking and that you are now going to be a critical thinker and roll with me. Let me start by saying, this is Alvin Toffler. And if you don't know who Alvin Toffler is, he's a futurist. Take a little note, write down Alvin Toffler. You can Google him later and find out more about it. But the thing that I want us to point out that Alvin says today is that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be people who cannot read and write, but it will be people who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to learn, unlearn, and relearn, how to build community, particular if you are working with Black student organizations or if you are a member of a Black student organization at a PWI. Let's start with some basic definitions. This is Dr. Malana Karanga, the founder of Kwanzaa. For those of you who celebrate Kwanzaa, if you don't celebrate Kwanzaa, but you've heard of it at least, then this is the guy who created it. But he's also good for coming up with these definitions. And his definition of Black is real simple, and I like to use it. Black is simply a color, a culture, and a consciousness. A color, a culture, and a consciousness. So you could be as Black as I am, or you could be as light as he is in that picture, or even lighter. Doesn't matter. We're talking about having a color. We're talking about culture. Be immersed and embrace the culture, and to have a consciousness which gives you a connection to the people. That's what it means to be Black. Now we got to talk about what I'm talking about when I say organization. An organization is the entity that is charged with creating, planning, and implementing strategies. And this is where Black student organizations on PWIs start going left. Strategies that define, promote, and advance the position of its members. So who are we planning for? Who are we providing strategies for? For people who are a part of the color, the culture, and the consciousness, and we want to define, promote, and advance our position of its members. So think about how I showed you in the beginning, the climate that we're in. Those 2 young sisters who are on those campuses, they need somebody to advance their position. Now, fortunately, they had a connection to communities because you saw people from their hometowns came out, but people from also from the community that the schools were in came out to support them. So this is important right now. If you don't know what it means to have a Black student organization, you now have a operational definition of it. These are 3 people I want to talk to you about. Because when I go to college campuses, I always hear, well, Mr. Smith, we're the greatest leaders. We're producing leaders. And okay, well, cool. Well, these are 3 leaders I want you to start thinking about. Fred Hampton, Kavanaugh Bell, and Amanda Gorman. And again, if you don't know who they are, for the interest of time, I'm not going to break down everything that they've done. But you should know about Fred Hampton, particularly because they just did a movie on his life. But Fred Hampton was the leader of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, who was murdered by the Chicago Police Department, but he was only 21 years old. Kavanaugh Bell was a student who was in Maryland. He was bullied, and he decided that his solution to being bullied was to do something for other people. So he started a food bank, and it has grown I mean, tremendously over the last year during the pandemic. So yes, we don't have an excuse about our age. And then Amanda Gorman is a poet who is speaking or has just spoken at the highest stage in terms of the presidential inauguration. So there's no excuse for us to say, well, I don't have enough. You got a kid who's 7 that didn't have anything. You got Fred Hampton who didn't go to college. You got Amanda Gorman who's 22. So you, in your age group, I'm giving you examples, past, present, and future with Kavanaugh, who are doing great things. So if you are a Black student who has made it to a predominantly white institution, who happens to be in some type of an organization, the world is yours. There are opportunities waiting for you if you choose to embrace them and engage in them. Now, again, I go places and everybody, and you know, every time somebody gets killed, you get the brothers who come out and the sisters who come out and they're ready to march and protest and they want the social media picture. And they, man, if that happened in my neighborhood or if that happened in here, I'd be out there in the streets ready and riding and protesting all that. Okay, you don't need to do all that. Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, who wrote the ISIS papers, if you have not read it, go get it, check it out. I'm giving you people, but I'm giving you other references too. But she says Black love is an act of revolution. I go to campuses where Black people see me walking down the quad or into the space where the Black people are, and they turn and don't even give me the universal head nod because they are so anti-Black, because they are so into themselves in their own space that they cannot simply acknowledge another human being. So if you are experiencing that on a predominantly white campus, you come there with a certain level of consciousness, and then everybody make you feel bad because you want to have a sense of community. So Black love is the start of having a sense of community, but it goes beyond what's on campus. You know, what do you do when you're out into the community? What do y'all call the people? The locals? Yeah, that's what they call them where I am right now, the locals. Okay, but you don't even engage in the local. You can't speak to a local because you think because you were lucky enough to get admitted to the school and they have been living in that same proximity of the school but don't have access, you are somehow better than them. That is not a good way to build community. There's going to be no unity in the community if that's the way that we're going. So first thing we need to do is commit ourselves to being a revolutionary by saying Black love is what I'm going to believe in. Next. This is Amin Rashidi, and I'm doing some Texas stuff with y'all. Amin Rashidi lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's a radio personality. He runs this program called the New Griot Nation. He's also a gang interventionist. He's also a spoken word artist. He's also an award-winning spoken word artist. Did a piece called Pretty Black Woman and won an Essence Award for it. But Amin took the words of Malcolm X and he repurposed them. And what Amin says is, what you see reflects what you feel determines how you think, and how you think will determine how you act, and how you act will determine how people react to you. So what I want to know is at TCU, what is it that people see when they see Black students? Yeah, I paused with that one because I want you to think about what do they see when they see Black students? So if you're a Black student at TCU and you go in and the student and the professor assigns a group project and people say, oh, I don't know if I want to be in a group with those Black people, because they don't see Black students, they don't see Black scholars, they don't see Black excellence, they see the N-word. So if I see an N-word, I feel like an N-word. Once I feel like an N-word, I think like an N-word. Once I think like an N-word, I act like an N-word. Once I act like an N-word, people react to me like they react to N-words. So you start having problems on the campus because they somehow or another have decided not to recognize your humanity. So what are you going to do? And this is why the Black student organizations are very important, because you are there to show other people your humanity. You are there so that they can see Black pride and feel Black pride, so that they can think about Black pride, so that they can act like Black. So then people can act and react to them like they react to Black pride, which should not be out of fear and hatred, because the fact that you love yourself does not mean you hate anybody else. You don't think you're better than anybody. You just know that you are a worthwhile person yourself. You are accepting and acknowledging your own humanity. So this is the model that I'll say. You see, you feel, you think, you act, and other people will react to you based on those things. So this is always a good question too. What is the appropriate response to a perceived attack on your humanity? Because what I have come to find out is I'm participating in the Citizens Police Academy. And in the Citizens Police Academy, I learned that the tactics that the police departments across the country are using have been changing over the last 10 years. And one of the things that they're changing is how they respond in terms of their use of force policies. And the use of force policy that they are doing now is based first and foremost on the idea that there's a sanctity to human life. And as I sat in the class and the instructor explained that this is sanctity to human life is the number one thing, I kept asking myself, well, if there's a sanctity to human life, how do you explain a Breonna Taylor? How do you explain a George Floyd? And then it hit me. You can train a police officer on this new tactic, and you can train them to say that there is sanctity in human life, but you have generally done nothing to train them that Black people are human. And so when I ask this question, what is the appropriate response to a perceived attack on your humanity? I look at all these attacks as not just racialized, but they are saying, I am not even human. So do you protest? Do you sit in silence? Do you take and seek counseling? Do you go out and tear stuff up and commit acts of violence? Do you directly confront the people who are attacking your humanity? Do you want to have a dialogue? And I know TCU is having lots of racial dialogues. Or do you say, I want revenge, I want retaliation? What is the appropriate response? And the reason I'm asking this question the way that I'm asking is because there are people out there who've already decided that you shouldn't respond a certain way. They've already decided that the way in which you want to respond is not acceptable. And so I want you to start thinking about what is the appropriate response. And I want other people to start asking themselves, what would they do if their humanity was under attack? So when you start building a sense of community, you recognize that communities are built on the fact that we share some commonalities, that we have a common experience. And that common experience is this attack on our humanity. So who's responsible for advocating for Black students? And I put a list of folks up here. We can go from the Chief Diversity Officer to the Vice President of Student Affairs. We can talk about the Director of Multicultural Affairs if you have one, or Intercultural Services, or Diversity and Inclusion and Belonging. We can talk about, is it Black graduate students like Brother Marcellus? Is it Black undergraduate students who are responsible for us? Is it the few Black faculty like Dr. G? Is it Black staff? And I don't even know who you have in a staff position there that's responsible for you. Is it Black student organizations? Is it the Director of the African American Studies program? Is it your parents? Who is responsible for advocating for Black students? I propose to you that today, it is everyone's responsibility for advocating for Black students. If you were not going to advocate for us, you should not have admitted us to the institution. That is as simple as I can make it, as plain as I can make it. Everyone has to and has the responsibility to advocate for us. Because if everyone is advocating for us, then we can hold everyone accountable when it doesn't happen. But since we got this thing where it's not my job, and I'm not the director of the so-and-sos, and you know, if I were in charge of diversity and equity, and my diversity person is the one who's going to do, no, everyone has to do it. Everyone has to do it. And you know what? I'm waiting for the day when we can not have a chief diversity officer, because the president of the university understands that his or her role is to be the chief diversity officer for the institution. That's what I'm looking forward to. I've been doing this diversity work for a very long time. Now, let me deal with Black student organizations. If you are a student and you're on this webinar and you are a member of a Black student organization, I want you to answer these three questions. Question number one, what's the one thing that your Black student organization is known for? Are you known for the Turn Up Thursday or the Break Best Party? Are you the Busset Challenge King or Queen? Or do you do the most cultural, fascinating and fabulous program where you embrace people and your study groups are helping the TCU Black community get 4.0s? Okay, so what's the one thing your organization is known for? And then question number two is, what is the value of that thing to the institution? See, some of y'all decide, I want to be in this organization because they have the best fashion show. They do the best program, and I want to be in charge of that. Well, what is the value of that fashion show to the institution? One of the things you might want to think about, and I didn't put the question up there, but I'll throw it out here for you. This is a freebie, a bonus. What is the currency of the institution? What is the currency of TCU? And if you don't know, the currency of the TCU is a thing called a grade point average. The higher your grade point average is, the more wealth you have in terms of what the institution is willing to see. You are valuable to them. If you don't believe me, take somebody who has a 0.0 GPA and try to go have a meeting with somebody. and then take somebody that's got a 4.0 and see if they can get a meeting with the same people and see who gets the meeting first. Now, what is that, the value of that thing that your organization is known for to Black people? I'm talking about the community, I'm talking about students, I'm talking about faculty and others. The Black people, the Black community on that campus. Your organization is known for what? Is it the best party of the year? Or is it something culturally significant that adds value to people? You help people graduate. You help people matriculate. You help people deal with the pressures of being minoritized at a predominantly white institution. What is the value of that? Now let me show you how you should be trying to figure this value out. Now, Georgetown University, they did a study a couple of years ago, and it said a person with a college degree on an average will earn at least $1 million more over the course of their lifetime than a person with a high school diploma that's doing the same type of work or studying the same type of things. Now, some of y'all only heard a person with a college degree is gonna make $1 million, but a person with a high school diploma won't make $1 million, and you ready to argue with me because your friend got a YouTube channel and they make $1 million. I'm not talking about that. That's not what the study says. They says if you have a college degree and this person has a high school diploma and y'all are doing the same type of stuff for a career, the person with the college degree should and generally does make over $1 million more than the person with the high school diploma. Now, again, there's tech jobs that throw that off. There's always exceptions to the rule, but we're just talking on average. So if that's the case, if you are in a Black student organization and there are 20 members in that student organization, then that's a $20 million franchise. And I would ask you to ask yourself, are you having a $20 million experience in that Black student organization? Does TCU treat you and that organization like it's worth $20 million? Does TCU treat you like you're a potential millionaire? And we all know that we treat people with money a little different, right or wrong. There's right, wrong, and real. We're gonna talk about real right now. People with money get treated better than people without. That's just how the world works, unfortunately. So if they thought you were going to be a future millionaire, somebody who could contribute once you graduate and you could put in some money in that alumni group, they would treat you a different way. And so when I'm asking you to recognize your own value, you are potential millionaires, whether you have a college degree or not. Ask those guys who dropped out of college if they are millionaires or not. You know who I'm talking about. Mr. Microsoft, Mr. Facebook, people who dropped out and then they still went on to make millions of dollars because they understood their value and their own worth. And sometimes we as Black members of the community don't know our own value and our own worth. Here's another question I want to ask you. And I put the answer into 10 categories and they're not in any particular order. What problems does being a member of your organization, your Black student organization, resolve for me? And what problems does being a member of your organization create for me? Does it create long-term or short-term problems? Does it resolve long-term or short-term problems? Does it give me developmental problems or spiritual problems? Does it resolve my developmental problems and my spiritual problems? Does it help me academically? It should, because you're on an academic institution. Does it help me socially, financially, historically, mentoring, culture? What does it do for me? And what problems does it create for me? You have to answer these questions. And if you are in a group and y'all have not had this conversation about what problems y'all are creating for other Black people and what problems y'all are solving for, then you don't know your worth and your value. And I would say that this is a conversation you need to be having. Now, what is the purpose of you going to college? The purpose of you going to college is so that you can get this foundation for human currency, the building block for life. And the way that you get this is, let me step out of the picture so y'all can see it. You want to take every opportunity you can to get as much education as you need so that you can fulfill your purpose, so that you can provide a service to yourself, your community, and your family. I'm gonna say it again. Every opportunity you can, that's the first line, to get as much education as you need. That's that line. So that you can fulfill your purpose, that's below me. So that you can provide a service to yourself, your family, and your community. If you can do that, because it's 4 lines, they form a square, which is a building block for life. You can then have what we call intellectual capital, moral capital, and spiritual capital. Once you have those 3 things, you can trade those for goods and services. This is really what you're doing when you graduate. You're trading your intellectual capital for money or other types of services and goods that you can get. You can use this repeatedly. This is why it's a foundation. You can stack these blocks side by side and then raise them up high and stack them up high, and you become a real human being, a great citizen, and worthwhile. Somebody wants to do business with you and trade with you and interact with you. This is why you came to college. It's not getting the degree, it's using the degree. And this is how you use the degree to fulfill your purpose. And I know some of y'all don't know what your purpose is, and that's why you stuck and you don't know what's going on. But your Black student organization, does it help you find your purpose, or does it get you lost in somebody else's purpose? Those are the questions I was asking a few minutes ago. Responsible versus being accountable. I talked about it earlier. If we all are responsible for Black students, then we all can be held accountable for Black students. But you have to be responsible for yourself, and that's accepting your role. And then the only way you know about whether or not how accountable you are is when you measure or evaluate your role. So those are the two things that you want to do. Responsible, what's your role in the organization? Let's measure the actual work that the organization does. Let's look at that to see what kind of community we can have. Now, these are communication theories, and they are mobility or motivation and ability. Motivation asks, is what we're trying to do worth the effort? Ability asks, can we actually do it? So I believe that you need motivation, and you need to be able to say, yes, it's worth my effort. And you need ability. Can we do it? We already know we can do it. We've done it before. But we get lost in our past and our history, and we don't understand what we've done before. So when it's time for us to do it again, we get lost because we don't know what happened and what came before us. So trust me, we have the motivation and we have the ability. And I'm hoping that today, something I say to you is going to give you more motivation. Now, I was a business major before I became a communication major. Finite math made me change my major. I just didn't like math. I could do it, but I didn't like it. So I changed my major. But one of the things I did was I learned about economic costs and opportunity costs in an econ class when I was a business major. But really, I should have studied philosophy, and I would have learned this law of sacrifice. Everything you gain of a higher nature, you must lose something of a lower nature, even though you might think it's equal value. So for instance, you want to have some unity in the community? That's a higher nature. What are you willing to give up? You got to be willing to give up with thinking that your sorority is better than the other sororities, or your fraternity is better than the other fraternity, because we're working together. So I'm going to give up that lower nature thought. I'm going to have a lower nature. Oh, you want better grades? Cool. All it's going to cost you is a little less time on those video games. Yeah. You want that significant other, that person? Well, all it's going to cost you is for you to stop being the type of person you was being before you met this person. Maybe that means you can't drink as much as you was drinking to have your college experience. Maybe it means you can't smoke as much as you was smoking, or you might not be able to smoke at all. But if you want this higher nature thing, that's what you're going to get. So what are you willing to sacrifice to get unity in the community? Yeah, I'm talking right now. I'm stepping on somebody's toes, because people are like, I don't want to give up nothing. I got what I want, and I'm not giving up. I'm not making a sacrifice. Then you're not going to get something of a higher nature. Don't tell me you want unity in the community, but you're not willing to put aside your petty differences. But Brian, you don't know what he did to me last month. He punched me in the eye, and he punched me in the eye, and he stole my wallet. Yeah, okay, but you got to forgive that. You got to let that go. It's a lower nature. You want unity in the community. You hope that they forgive them, and you figure out a way to move beyond that. Now, we got all kind of other examples we can use. I know y'all like, well, wait a minute, when you punch in the eye, I'm not talking about domestic violence and nothing like that. I'm talking about if two brothers get into a fight over basketball or Madden or whatever it is that brothers fight about nowadays, then we got to be able to move beyond that, the law of sacrifice. We got students on campuses right now, Black and white, who are at odds. But they say we want to have an educational institution that values diversity. But what are you willing to sacrifice to get that? We're going to have to make some changes. We can't have all the buildings named after people that don't look like nobody. But we can't have all the buildings named after men who are old and gray and don't live here no more. We got to do some different things. So what does that mean to the institution? Well, maybe we got to change the fee that we charge to have a building named after you. And we got to reduce that until we get an influx of people who represent the type of university that we want, so we can lower that rate, and then we build them back up, and hopefully then we can start, asking for a little bit more money later. Law of sacrifice. Trying to make sure I stay on time here. Now, this is the other thing. You want to have unity in the community? Then you got to realize that excuses don't explain and explanations don't excuse. Kenneth Blanchard is a business person. And what Kenneth talks about is there's a difference between interest and commitment. When you're interested in doing something, you only do it when it's convenient. But when you committed to it, you don't accept excuses. You only accept results. And so what I'm telling you is all this stuff about, well, man, we don't have enough money to build a community. There's not enough Black people here to build a community. No more excuses. We only accepting results. And this is something, one thing about excuses that I learned a long time ago. If you don't give excuses, then you are not obligated to accept excuses from other people when they make them. You ask for explanations and you accept good explanations, but you don't have to accept an excuse from anyone as long as you're not out there making excuses. But see, so many of us are making excuses that we don't have no choice but to accept them from other people. Now, this is a trick. I was an administrator for 15 years. I worked at 5 different college campuses. This is administrative time cycles. Your average undergraduate member experience is going to last 5 years. If you was a freshman and you joined a student organization and you stayed at that school 5, maybe 6 years to graduate, you being an active member of that group is probably only going to last at most 5 years. But the school thinks in 3, 5, 7, 10, 20-year plan cycles. I can guarantee you that almost every Black student organization on their campus, not one of them has a 5, 10, 7-year plan already mapped out about what they want for the organization 7, 10, 5 years from now. But the institution, TCU, has a plan. Somewhere in some drawer, there's a 3-year plan, there's a 5-year plan, there's a 7-year plan, there's probably a 10-year plan, there might be a 25-year plan, there might even be a 50-year plan. So you have to get into your mindset that you are building a community that you personally may not benefit from. If you do the work to lay the foundation so that the community grows, you might actually graduate and be gone when the community exists. So you want to make sure that you put that time in. Only way to bring about change is to have this 3-step or 3 phases in your setup. You got to have an impact event. For some of you, me being here tonight is going to be your impact event. Then you got to have a transitional moment. That's where you decide, oh yeah, you know what? That impact event made me see things a little differently. I need to transition into something different. And that's when you actually start trying. The transformational phase is where you either going to make it or you're going to break yourself. See, transformational phase is when you have to deal with all the people who didn't have the same impact event you had. And so they start telling you why you shouldn't change and why things don't need to change. But if that is what happens, you end up in another little, what I call a loop. You go back to the impact event because every time they tell you you can't change, you shouldn't change, it impacts you all over again. And then you start trying from scratch all over and you get stuck. But if you go through the 3 phases, once you have your transformational phase, and the phase can last a long time for the transformational part. But once you come out of it, you have changed. That's how change does. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to change your grades, trying to change your relationship situation, trying to change your jobs, trying to change whatever. It's the same thing. 3 phases: impact event, transitional moment, and transformational phase. Now, why do we need Black student organizations and strong Black student organizations? This is Dr. Asa Hilliard, used to teach at the University of Georgia. And he talks about the idea that dominating populations, they just suppress their victims. They don't want you to think you're part of a cultural family. They teach white supremacy. They want you to not have control of your socialization process. They control the accumulation of wealth, and they teach and put you under what we call segregation and apartheid. His question that he always asks, well, how do we maintain and restore a healthy ethnic identity? Because nobody wants you to come to TSU and be Black, but when you graduate and walk across the stage, you confused and you don't know what you are, who you are. This is Dr. John Henry Clarke. If you call yourself a Black person, you want some consciousness in his, and you don't know the works of Dr. Clarke, you need to know it. Dr. Clarke says it is impossible to continue to oppress a consciously historical people. This is why we stand to tell you different things. This is an example of consciousness and historically abusing folks. When you look at this picture, Colin Kaepernick caught all kind of heck because he took a knee. But if you look at the picture, all he was saying was, hey, you know what? I believe in taking a knee. And Dr. Martin Luther King took a knee and everybody liked Dr. King. So you see Dr. King over here taking a knee. But then if Colin Kaepernick had a little bit more knowledge, he could say up in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., that's George Washington taking a knee. And ain't nobody mad at George Washington for taking a knee. But if he had a little bit more knowledge, he could go all the way back to Egypt, to Ma'at and Anubis and the principles of Ma'at. And he could show that they're taking a knee. And he could say, this is an ancestral thing that I'm doing. I'm not trying to hurt nobody. I'm just trying to be true to who I am as an African. okay? But you got to know that. You got to have some kind of context. Context is key when you're dealing with these things. This is another contextual picture. On my left, this is a picture of the police in Birmingham in 1958 or 60. I can't remember what the right year is. I have to go back and say. But if you notice, these police officers got their knee on this black woman's neck. This is Officer Chauvin, former Officer Chauvin, with his knee on George Floyd's neck. So there's a history to this. We know what we do. And I'm trying to wrap up because I know you might have some questions. All right. If you want to be a good leader, then I'm going to show you the principles of Ma'at. Anything you want to build community, build your community based on these 7 principles: truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, and propriety. If you can build your community around these 7 principles, you can have a great community. You have to build your leadership around these 7 principles. If you're not building your leadership around these things and you don't have these 7 things that you want, then you're not going to have what you're trying to have. You're going to have chaos in your life. But this is a good way to build community. Now, why again? Because power concedes nothing without a demand. This is Frederick Douglass, who was an advisor to President Abraham Lincoln, but he's also an escaped enslaved person. And again, great person that you need to read more about. Dr. John Henry Clark again says, powerful people don't teach powerless people how to take their power away from them. That's a deep statement. Powerful people don't teach powerless people how to take their power away from them. TCU is doing a wonderful job with this series, and they're trying to show you what you need to take the power, but you got to get it. And if you think they're going to keep putting these webinars on and trying to empower you, and you're not going to do nothing with it, they're not going to keep going. Now, if you're a Black student organization, these are 2 things you need. You need an advisor, because that's what the school says, but you also need an advocate. Advisors who is in their job description to advise your Black student organization, according to this court case in 2006, they obligated to tell on you every time you say you want to do something, because it's in their job description. They don't have a choice. But you have an advocate who is somebody who's not in the department, who it's not part of their job description to be your advisor, because then you can run ideas by them and they can give you good sound advice without being obligated to tell on you. Got it? We have, let's see, I'm going to stop this right now. We got 5 minutes, I think, and I want to be a good steward of your time. Just going to show you a couple of other quick slides. 5 trainable areas of leadership: your beliefs, your skills, your values, your knowledge, and your character. If you can do that, then I think you're going to have, you're on track to be a really good leader in building the community. If you want the top 3 skills, this is a list of 20 skills. And you pick 3 that you think will help you build community. And I want you to be dedicated and committed to choosing these 3 that you're willing to work on. Winning trust, I would say that. Embracing change, developing others. Those are 3. But if you don't like those, maybe you're going to be a strategic thinker. Conflict management, listening to understand. So you can pick 3. There's a lot of them on here. This is taken from Forbes magazine this past November 2020. So this is what the corporate leaders are looking for. And at closing, this is my last slide for you. Always ask yourself these self-reflective concepts. 1, were any people harmed or wronged by my actions? 2, did my actions demonstrate or create a conflict in my value system? And 3, was my leadership conditional or conceptual? Conditional means I'm only a leader under certain conditions. Conceptual means I understand the concept of leadership and I embrace what that means to be a leader. So I know I rushed through a whole lot of this stuff and I hit you, and that's really my style. I try to overwhelm you with information so that it makes you think. Remember, you don't have to agree, but I gave you a lot to think about. I want you to be a critical thinker. So I'm going to stop this screen share. I'm ready for some questions. Marcellus, it's on you.
Man, okay. If we can just give a round of applause wherever you are in your room, Zoom, or whatever you are. Because, man, I'm going to read that bio, the first line again. Bryant K. Smith is the baddest brother on the planet, because that was phenomenally great. But we really do appreciate it. I think we have some comments, as you can see, people are really saying, thank you so much for your time. While I ask you the first question, feel free to use the question and answer app tab up there if you have any questions for Mr. Smith that we can get to. So for me, one of my first questions for you is you talked about this idea of sacrifice and how Black students have to sacrifice. And I think even in my own personal experience as a grad student at a PWI, went to undergrad at PWI, but my high school didn't necessarily reflect that. So that transition from high school to college was a little bit difficult because that sense of community wasn't there.
Yes.
And, I think for a lot of Black students in PWIs, when we don't have that feeling of community, we kind of fall victim of not trying to create or facilitate healthy community habits within our own smaller communities. So essentially, we kind of enact those same power structures we face externally, internally with our own community. I see that a lot of different ways. So what advice would you provide for students who are at a PWI that, you give us a lot of information, but that are just kind of struggling with this idea of, I don't feel like I belong at this school. I don't feel like I belong within the Black community. I don't feel like I belong on my campus. So I'm just kind of struggling internally and externally, just kind of find a space for myself as an individual.
Yeah. So the idea of individualism is not an African idea. We believe in collectivism. And so what I want you to start thinking about is start small. Start with yourself. Build within yourself the concept and idea that you are on that campus because you belong on that campus. That's the first thing. Second thing, why did you come to the campus? You came to the campus to get something. You came to get your education, but you also came to get a sense of community. If you do not see the community that you want, then your job is to create the community. And you start small. 1 or 2 people who think like you, who have been isolated, and you just get together. I'm fortunate in the sense that growing up in Chicago, I was short and skinny. Like when I got to high school, I was 4 feet, 11 inches tall and 100 pounds if I was carrying my book bag, okay? So I was bullied. So what I found was that there were a group of people who were outcasts, literally. We weren't the jocks, we weren't the smartest kids, we weren't the richest kids, but we recognized that if we stood together, we had power. And so that's what I'm suggesting that you do. Build a community, start small, identify 1 or 2 other people who think like you, get together and start your community that way.
And just to kind of follow up with you and this idea of community, you've been at a lot of different institutions, Clemson being one of them. How do we get our Black student athletes into the fold? Because for a lot, especially at these Power 5 institutions, they're pretty much protected. They can't, engage as much, participate, even though a lot of them do. They would like to, participate in the BSAs and NAACPs, but due to time constrictions or, just not having enough energy, they're not there, right? So the perception is like our Black athletes don't care. Whereas, we're looking at a lot of different institutions, a lot of Black athletes are participating in these protests or kind of, behind them. So how can maybe admin, I know there's some admin on the call as well, or other Black student leaders, how do we pull in that piece of our community who we see gets exploited day in and day out, but also very isolated because of the structure in which an institution places them?
Okay, so one of the things is we got to change our language. If you came to me and I was an athlete and you start telling me how exploited I'm being used, et cetera, I'm probably not going to want to be down with you, because I don't see myself as being exploited. I see myself as making sacrifices. Remember, the law of sacrifices applies to all of us. So you have to recognize what they believe they are sacrificing for and look at what they believe they are gaining compared to what you are gaining. And so we have to be comfortable asking people to make risk-appropriate investments in our community. So for somebody that's trying to be a professional athlete or whose academics are being paid for by whether it's an athletic scholarship or an academic scholarship, we should not be placing demands on them that would risk those things, because we're not risking the same type of stuff. So the good thing about technology is even when those athletes can't attend meetings and those kind of things, virtually we can stay connected to them. The most powerful thing we can do with them is to share information with them and then ask for them to share within their networks. That's one of the greatest ways we can do it. So that's a little different than what you used to be able to do, where you wanted them to be at the Black Student Union meeting. They might not be there because of practice and meetings and all that kind of stuff. The other thing we got to give up, though, is this concept of we need everybody. I don't care what movement you talk about. We ain't never had everybody. if you go back and look at the civil rights movement with Dr. Martin Luther King, the majority of Black preachers and churches and Black organizations were opposed to Dr. King. They kept saying he's a troublemaker. He's going to get us all in trouble and get us all killed, get all these crosses burnt in all our yards. So you never need or going to get everyone. So instead of focusing on the people who not there, focus on the people who show up. Give that group of people such a powerful and positive experience that the people on the outside will be begging to get in because they see what you're doing and they want it. So you got to build, I don't care, whatever you got, build it to the point that it's attractive. And then let people be attracted to it as opposed to trying to go out and recruit as much. Because we spend a lot of time worried about who not in the room, so much to the extent that we don't take care of the people who are in the room.
No, that's excellent point. Excellent point. Another question that I have is, how can we as Black students, faculty, and staff support our Black faculty and staff? I think for a lot of times we forget that they too got their own struggles. And sometimes they could be the only Black person on their department. A Black professor fighting for tenure. That we forget that they also too have struggles, even though sometimes they're seen as part of the power structure. They're just a Black person within it, necessarily, moving forward, sometimes can be used as our advocates. So how can Black students, not to say that that's their responsibility, but also, bring them to the fold and support our Black faculty and staff that are trying to support us?
Excellent question. One thing we got to do is most of us, for whatever reason, don't even ask Black faculty and staff, how you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? We're a student organization that's concerned about the Black experience, and that includes you. And we just want to know, is it something we can do for you? Just have those kind of open, honest dialogues. And then there's a couple of there's some basic stuff. I used to be a director of multicultural affairs, and my students, some of them, hey, Dad, they refer to me as a dad, which is cool when we in our multicultural center and in that space. But if I'm standing next to the president and you walk up on me and you say, hey, Dad, and you keep saying that a couple of times, the president is not trying to promote me from multicultural affairs director to dean of students if everybody's calling me daddy. Likewise, we do a whole lot of Black women. Hey, mama. Hey, mama. No, that's Dr. So-and-so. That's Mrs. So-and-so. So that people understand that you have a respectful relationship. So those are little things. And then, just the idea that when you're having discussions with the institution about what it is that you need, make sure that you include statements that reference Black faculty and staff. And I'm talking about everybody from the cafeteria worker to the groundskeepers, to the janitors, all the way up to the full tenured professors or the provost or vice president or president, if you happen to have somebody that's Black that is in that role. And, you make it clear that you are speaking for all of those people, even if they never show up, because that's really what you are doing. You're speaking for those people. You're speaking for the people in the community who don't even get to go to the school. Okay, so just be more inclusive.
Wow, that's spot on. Another question that came to mind as you were speaking is, how do we look to incorporate our local community, right? You spoke a little bit about how some people perceive, quote unquote, the locals as outsiders, but they're very much a part of the school, whether we want to believe so or not. Our schools, our resources are within their neighborhoods, which neighborhoods has been there for generations. So how do we kind of incorporate them into our fold?
Okay, and I see this is our last question, so let me try to make sure I be a good steward of our time. And I thank you all for staying on so long. The main thing that we need to recognize is that each one of us is one decision away from being somebody who's excluded from one of these institutions. And so if you go into it with that concept and that idea, the people who are not enrolled in your school but look like you, who happen to who live in the spaces around the institution, they are you. And so you have to recognize that you go to their churches or their religious institutions, you go to their stores, you try to put yourself in the community to offer assistance and help in that community. So you become part of the community. Stop showing up as a visitor or as a stranger and become a guest. And you want to be a guest to that community. And you do that by going out and introducing yourself and finding ways for you to be involved in that community. So that's my last comment. And I thank y'all again for having me on. I really appreciate it. Marcellus, it's on you, and thank y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. Also want to thank all the participants for making time for this important conversation. We hope that you gain some bit of information from it. Before I close, I would like to promote an event for BSA on Sunday, April 25th, Purple Praise at 7:30 p.m. in the Blue. You can reserve your spot on TCU Engage. As you all know, this is RRI, the Race and Reconciliation Initiative. We are trying to attempt to study TCU's history of racism, slavery, and the Confederacy. Reconciliation Day will be next week, 4/21, Intellectual Commons from 11 to 2 p.m. We invite all to come out. Reconciliation Day has been a long process building up and leading up to it. We understand that what we've done will not be able to change TCU, will not be able to change systematically every issue that Black faculty, staff, and students face here at TCU. But we believe that it can be a step. Once we research the history, be honest about who we were, who we are now, we can be honest in which direction we choose to move to in the future. So with that being said, I invite you all to Reconciliation Day on 4/21. Check our website periodically for more updates and information. And as always, with the information that we have, we hope that you take something from it. Please understand that we are trying the best to do what we can with what we have. Until next time, thank you.